Welcome to episode number 1, the debut episode of the Church Leadership Podcast here on YouTube. In this episode, I sit down with my co-host Andy Frazier, and we have a great discussion. So listen, and I hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the Church Leadership Podcast, your weekly source for encouraging and equipping local church leaders, with your hosts, Mark Gainey and Andy Frazier. In each episode, Andy and Mark sit down with church leaders that you should know. We believe these honest conversations will be helpful and encouraging to you as you lead the local church. Here is this week's episode.
Welcome to episode number 1. And in this episode, I'm sitting down with my friend and co-host, Andy Frazier. And we
That's
figured
a small world. Good to see you here today, Mark.
Great to see you.
Yeah.
Long
you
time
can't
no
see
see
us there, but you can hear us. So good to hear you.
That's right. Well, what we want to do really in these first couple episodes is kind of give you a glimpse of who we are. And we want you to hear our story so that you can understand where we're coming from and why we're doing this. And so, Andy, we're going to start with you today. And I want to start just by asking you what we ask a lot of the folks on our podcast, and that is this. Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us about your ministry, where you're serving. Tell us about your family.
Well, Mark, thanks for having me on the show today. I appreciate that.
Don't mention it.
No, I am really looking forward to our time together, that we're going to get to share some stories with a lot of interesting people. I mean, some people that I believe have something great to say. And it's not that I feel like I have a story that's that much greater than anybody else's. I'm excited to be able to kind of share with you guys who I am, and you get to know us through the first couple of episodes.
That's right.
So my name's Andy Frazier. I live in the metropolis of Sumiton, Alabama. We're right outside of Birmingham, northwest Birmingham, about 15 miles. I am currently serving at Grace Baptist Church there in Sumiton. I've been in ministry a little over 20 years, and in my time in ministry, I have done about everything, served about every capacity and role that you could imagine. I get to do life with a wonderful lady named Christy Frazier, who has been a gracious wife and a partner in ministry and an awesome mom. We've been married, we'll be 18 years here in just a few weeks. And in our time of being together over the years, she has taught me a lot. One of the things she has taught me is about being a good parent and about grace. We have 3 boys. We have Drew, Blake, and Cade, who I am a proud dad. They teach me a lot about the love of the Heavenly Father constantly, and they're wonderful help in our ministry also. And over the years, as my wife and I have endured a lot of hardships, we've also experienced a lot of blessings in ministry. Some of those have come from those various positions I've served at as student pastor, associate pastor, minister of announcements. I'm sure you probably served in that role too.
That's right.
Done a little bit of everything. We've planted a church and failed, so I've got that notch in my belt.
We have that in common.
Yes. And I've served as a director of missions for a small local Baptist association in our area. And a lot of the ministry God has called us to has been not your typical, we want to run into that situation wide open, and we're looking forward to it. A lot of ministry God has called my family and me to has been revitalization. It's been helping rebuild and restore and encourage churches, a lot of smaller churches. We've been full-time in ministry. I'm currently bivocational. Not only have I been doing ministry for a little over 20 years, but I've also off and on in those 20 years been bivocational. I grew up in a farm setting around horses, and I put myself through college, through going to horseshoeing school and apprenticing and learning to do that. And I've been doing that a little over 20 years as well. So currently I am a farrier, a full-time farrier in the central Alabama area. I travel to people's farms and barns and take care of their horses' feet. That's how we pay the bills and put food on the table at our home, as well as I'm thankful for my wife being a teacher, because without her we wouldn't have insurance. So that's awesome.
I'm pretty confident in saying this, that the people listening, I would be. I think I'm right in saying you will probably never ever meet another pastor or church leader who is a full-time farrier. That's kind of cool.
Well, there may be some other guys out there. If there are, I'd like to meet them. I'd
Yeah,
love
I
to
bet.
sit down and have coffee with them and talk with them. But it's the path God has put us on, and we've enjoyed it. It's hard work, but it's good work, and I've been able to have my own business and keep my own schedule. I mean, it can be demanding at times, but for the most part, it has worked really well to go hand in hand with serving churches and being able to have some flexibility to do that.
You do that by choice. So those folks listening that don't know you, you're not bivocational because you have to be. You do that by choice. That's by intention.
Yeah. It's provided us a lot of opportunities for me to have that vocational training and experience and ability to provide for my family that way. As a matter of fact, the current church we're serving has been a revitalization. In our first little over a year and a half there, I didn't even get a paycheck. I was the volunteer pastor there for a little over a year and a half. And we did that just basically because God was able to provide for our family through the full-time job that I have being a farrier. And it's neat. I get to meet a lot of interesting people who aren't your typical church people. And it's fun. I get exposed to a lot of things that I wouldn't be exposed to just sitting in an office behind a desk every day. But over the years, God has allowed us to see and experience a lot of things. I think we have a lot of interesting stories that we could share. I know we don't have time to share them all today, but a lot of neat things. One of the greatest things I think God has blessed me with is some of the relationships and friendships that I've been able to develop over the years, and that one of those being with Mark and I. So I'm thankful for my friend Mark here and how God has blessed our friendship the last few years. It's been awesome to see.
It has been.
We're jumping in this venture. It's neat to see where it's headed as well.
Well, Andy, if you would, tell us a little bit about your story. You've shared a little bit already, but kind of talk about how God got you to this point where you're passionate about pouring into the lives of local church leaders. Talk about how He has given you this vision for making disciples and helping the local church.
Well, it started years ago when I was young and had hair.
It's too bad you guys can't see him now, but go to the website.
Just a picture.
Look at the picture.
Yeah. But anyway, early on in my call to ministry, I was hungry to seek out some men who would mentor and coach and disciple me. And I went to my pastor at the time. I went to some other guys I knew that were leading in local churches, even had some relatives who were called to ministry before I was, and went and had conversations with each of them and got a lot of positive, encouraging affirmation from each of them. Hey, the call to ministry, you should be prepared, and here's a great path that would help you prepare for ministry, and we will kind of network with some people and try to get you some opportunities. But none of them mentioned anything about intentionally investing in me, and that's what I was seeking out. I wanted somebody to teach me how to teach. I wanted somebody to show me how to be a minister and how to prepare to be a pastor. And not only that, I would love to have had some insight on how to be a husband and a dad.
Yeah, that would have been nice. Yeah.
And the more I sought that out, the more rejection I got. It wasn't oftentimes intentional rejection. Sometimes it was just by way of guys being too busy. Maybe they overcommitted by saying, yeah, I'll meet with you or talk with you, and they never delivered on their promise to do that. And I got really discouraged by that. That was a tough season for me, my first few years in ministry. I did have some great friends that helped me out a lot, and I could lean on them. But basically, I immediately had a burden not only in my own heart and life to be mentored and discipled and somebody invest in me, but I thought, there's got to be other people out there that feel the same way I do.
Right.
They want somebody to invest in them and walk along beside them and help them. So me and some friends who were called to ministry started to meet together, pray together, and do accountability together and ministry together, and it was an amazing time. I went from being discouraged, what do I do, to wow, this is what I'm supposed to do. Not only have others pouring into my life, but for me to invest in others' lives. So that was early on a desire I had. It wasn't long after that, some people put some resources in my hands that have been very influential and helpful to me, along with obviously Scripture, but just seeing how Jesus did ministry, how Jesus invested in people. One of the greatest books that has impacted my life in ministry has been Robert Coleman's book, The Master Plan of Evangelism. I read that book, and it opened my eyes to see ministry and the world following Jesus in a whole new way.
Yeah, it's a classic for a reason.
It really is. And I began to see, wow, spending time with a few people is a great investment. A lot of guys are focused on drawing crowds and getting more people, and I began to see, there's only so much you can do and only so far you can go with that. Once you get a crowd, then what?
Right.
So over time in ministry, my hunger for pastoring and leading began to grow. I went from being student and associate pastor to leading my first church, and it was interesting. Wow, let me just tell you. We had some obstacles and hurdles to overcome in our first church. I was young and experienced and mature and patient, all those things. But God still blessed. We moved on eventually from pastoring there to ended up serving as director of missions not too long after that.
So how old were you when you became a director of missions? Because this is a strange and an odd and unique situation.
Yeah, I was 34 years old, if my memory serves me correct. But around the age of 29 or 30, I kind of knew that's the direction I was going to go.
Wow.
And it was a small association of small churches, and it was even bivocational.
Right.
But it was where my heart was. I wanted to invest in others. I wanted to pour into others. I wanted to help churches and help leaders and see churches experience kingdom growth, to see churches experience health. And two things that I wanted to see happen in my time serving as a director of missions, that I wanted to invest in church revitalization and church planting. And church revitalization in small rural congregations is hard because they want the change and they know they need the change, but accepting what it takes to make those changes is hard. We saw a few churches close their doors, a few churches who were hesitant to receive needed help and change. Some are still going through that process.
Right. Sounds like every church in America, maybe
Absolutely.
amplified a bit in the rural setting.
And then we planted a church, and basically that came out of our association had the desire that I was leading at the time to plant a church, and nobody stepped up to lead. And God kept tapping me on the shoulder saying, hey, you're the one that's supposed to do this. And I did. Made a lot of mistakes. And it was timing. It was a lot of other things, but it was a great experience to learn from. If you learn from your mistakes, I learn a lot every single day. I make a lot of mistakes. So during that season, we learned from a lot of our mistakes. And then we've kind of gone back to serving now in a church that was in great need of revitalization. A church that when we got there, a sanctuary that seated 600 plus, almost 700 people, and there were 30 people our first Sunday we started there. They didn't know if they were going to be able to keep their doors open. They didn't know if they were going to be able to pay their bills or pay their mortgage. And they had a heavy load of debt and a lot of baggage in the past that was there that we had to kind of get over the hump. And now that church is out of debt. It's growing. It's healthy. We run 150 to 175 on Sundays now. But the thing I'm the most excited about is not the amount of people we have attending our worship services, but the amount of people that are being invested in or investing in others in one-on-one or one-on-few discipling relationships. And I think that's been a key to revitalization.
Absolutely.
Over the years, especially in the church that we're serving in now. Learning from some of those mistakes, but also implementing some of the things that has worked. It's been great to see God do some neat things at Grace Baptist Church there in Sumiton.
It is an incredible story and an incredible church, no doubt. So let me ask this question to you, Andy. To those folks who are listening, I think this would be helpful. Thinking back on your ministry, thinking back on your career, bivocational ministry and full-time work as a farrier. What are some of the tougher lessons or most rewarding lessons you have learned as a pastor and leader?
I think some of the tougher lessons I've learned is when you are impatient as a leader, God has a way of teaching you patience as a leader.
Yes, he does. It's not fun either.
I've been known, I don't know about you, maybe you guys listening, maybe you have this same tendency. I've been known to try to run ahead of God. When I have a great idea or I think He's given me an idea, I just run with it rather than pray and consider and talk with others. And
well, I do all those things. I mean, we know what God wants to do anyway, right?
Yeah, so many times when I've been impatient and try to get ahead of God, things don't work out the way they probably should have or need to. So that's one thing. I've learned patience from that. A lot of times when God gives a leader a vision or a path that He wants the church to go, sometimes it's something that He gives you then to kind of prepare your people for on down the road. It may not be that, hey, He wants you to do this, let's all jump on board right now, and run with it. It may be you need to talk with people in your church and pray with people in your church and kind of give them direction of what you're thinking before you walk behind the pulpit and announce, all right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to scrap this and start this. And so impatience has been an Achilles heel for me in ministry.
Man, that is one of the hardest lessons.
It is.
But I can echo that. I mean, if you were to ask me that question, I would say the same thing, because I think as leaders, that's what we do. We get ahead of God.
Absolutely. And
we forget that vision isn't for always right now. It's for later sometimes.
But the other thing is experiencing what I've experienced. I have a very tender spot for investing in others. So one of the things that I've learned is never underestimate the importance of investing in a few and doing leadership development the right way. And by that, what I mean is taking time. Don't be in a hurry. Don't rush it. Spend the time with one person or a few people on a regular basis and just pouring into them, letting them have access to your life as well as encouraging them and challenging them. And when you do that, you're going to see over time a difference, a complete culture change in the leadership and even in the membership of your church when you do that. And a lot of mistakes I've made in the past have been just sitting down with leaders in the church saying, look, this is what we need to do, and I'm going to give you the work, and you the work, and you do this, and you do this, and I'm going to do this. All right, ready, break. Let's go.
That's
right. Instead of seeing what people's spiritual giftings are, seeing what people's personality and experience and their education and where their heart and what they're passionate about, how all those things tie together in accomplishing what God wants you to as a church. And you don't do that unless you get to know somebody.
That's right.
So sitting down with somebody, having coffee with them, or being in a small group with them, or one-on-one or one-on-few intentional discipling relationship with them over time, it pays huge dividends in the long run for you, because you get a lot out of that personally, but for them, but most importantly for your church. So those are probably a couple of the things that have been important to me. And the other one is never let anything compete with your personal relationship with Jesus or the relationship that you have with your family. That meeting can wait. Those things that you have to be at, you don't always have to be at them.
That's right.
What's important is the time you spend with your wife or your spouse and your kids. Outside of that, your relationship with Jesus Christ. Those are the two most important things in ministry. Is if you're not pastoring that small church under your roof, then you're really not qualified to pastor any other church. So those lessons over the years have been important to me. I try to include my family in ministry, not just come home and tell them about it, but try to include them in ministry. I don't want my wife or my kids to think that the church stole their husband or their dad away, but I want them to love Jesus and love the church as much or more than I do. And it's just a privilege and an honor. It's very humbling. I wake up every day and I'm humbled. And I almost ask the question, "Are you sure, God? Are you sure today you want me to do this? Because I'm a mess." So, but I mean, I also have learned work matters.
Yeah.
Not to belittle any person who is in full-time ministry, I loved being in full-time ministry, and that's not out of the question for me to do that again, but I also value work. I've always enjoyed working, doing something with my hands, and one of the great benefits of that is you can get to work and do something and accomplish something, and you have tangible results. In ministry, you can get frustrated because you're pouring your heart and your life and your time, and you're putting all this effort into ministry, and sometimes you don't see those tangible results, so it can get frustrating. As well as it's made ministry and life and how those things intersect a lot more relatable to the churches that I've been able to lead. You know, there's some leverage there. When you start talking about giving of your time or investing your finances or, you know, making sacrifices for your family, people will listen to you because they know you're right there in the trenches with them. And sometimes we can kind of be removed from that in full-time ministry. But whatever God's called you to, whether it's full-time or bivocational ministry, it's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful calling, and I can't say enough of how thankful I am to be able to do what I do.
Absolutely. Dude, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. You know, I always say this, but when I spend time with you, Andy, I always walk away encouraged. And so I know the folks listening who are hearing this and listening to your story are going to feel the same way. And maybe somebody's listening that's bivocational. Maybe somebody's listening that's considered starting something on the side to help support and provide. But I know you guys are encouraged. I will say this. Andy mentioned the Master Plan of Evangelism. That's going to be in our show notes. And you can always go to churchleadershippodcast.com, and you can check out our show notes there as well. And we'll have some resources in there too. But let me tell you, man, I am pumped about this journey. I am so excited that God has put us together doing this. And so hope you guys were encouraged. I know you were, and hope you were a little more equipped to lead the local church. And we can't wait to see you guys next time. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Church Leadership Podcast. We hope you'll join us again next week.